We shall vape before we speak. Good morning, all. How are we? Got the old tea as well. It's a lovely morning. Okay. This is important, all right? Well, I think so. I think we like. Here we go. To help trans-identifying kids follow the science. This was published on April the 5th by Genspect, and I've just come across it, and I thought it was very well worth us considering what's being said here. It's been written by Anonymous, and the headline is "Much is being learned." As usual, the links will be in the doobries. Please do subscribe to my channel if you can, yeah, so we can keep getting the message out there, because I think there are positive things happening, and we need to keep an eyeball to make sure everything's on the right direction, and for those of us committed to doing so. So let's do try and keep the ball rolling. But let's take a look at what this article from Genspect says. I think it's very interesting indeed. As a STEM researcher and a lifelong Liberal Democrat, I fervently hold that young trans-identifying people, or those with gender dysphoria (brackets, distress with their sexed body), deserve the best treatment that science and medicine can offer. I believed until rather recently that gender dysphoria and its optimal treatments were all understood, and that the biggest problem was that young people couldn't access the medical interventions they needed. As advised by many of the Liberal organisations I belong to, I signed petitions to representatives and organisations in support of what I thought was necessary supportive treatment for these young, vulnerable people. My heart was, and is, in the right place, but my information was wrong. I think that opening statement is an absolute indicator of a common problem for many, many people, that they believed in the very concept of gender identity to begin with, and that our understanding of what is a made-up term, right? A made-up term, that's all it is. It's just a made-up term as they eked it through these various psychiatric books in order to stigmatise the idea of fetishism and paraphilic men dressing in a way they want to in public, and piggybacked on the distress of young men, particularly young men to begin with, who were rather effeminate at a very early age and therefore showed signs of ideation towards the other sex and distress with their personality. After gender dysphoria has impacted my inner circle, I began studying the scientific literature to learn more. As I pored over published papers, comparing their assertions with the evidence offered in support, I became increasingly alarmed. A study would find only an association with an intervention. Association means you do not know whether the intervention caused an outcome. That's an experiment, by the way. And then imply the intervention caused benefit. For example, access to this treatment is associated with lower odds of lifetime suicide ideation. We know that most of this is nonsense. This study strengthens recommendations for this treatment to be made available for transgender adolescents who want it. This is where you begin with the premise of scientific certainty, and you end with the understanding of scientific quackery, or fraud, or just simply errors. Anybody who's familiar with the eugenics movement will know that it was only when they returned to the original science that they were able to debunk it and stop what was the greatest scandal in history in terms of medicine. I think that's going to pale next to this one. The abstract of another study highlighted people reporting they improved from medication, but didn't mention that their corresponding clinician reports did not find this improvement. Wishful thinking. While yet another study showed impressive plots of benefit with medical intervention, even though once one took into account accompanying mental health interventions for the conditions, only one of their 12 measures had a statistically significant improvement. This individual, whoever it may be, found that information was hidden in a table at the end, rather than presented fully in the report. There are liars at work, folks, and children have been sterilised and mutilated. The list goes on. This essay is an attempt to share with you what I've learned. Something has gone very wrong in our attempt to help these young people, so much so that too many have been badly harmed, and I hope to explain why. There's also a documentary that comes with this, which is included in the links in the article, which is in the Dubris. It turns out that gender dysphoria is not well understood. Now, my argument has always been that gender dysphoria is not well understood. In fact, I don't think it exists. I think it's an amalgam, a convenient amalgam that people could capitalise on. I think what you have is distress. They're talking here, if you notice also in this article, they're talking here about young people. That's important to mention. Okay? They're not talking about the original cohort of troubled young children. Not the original cohort of boys who were extremely effeminate. Not that original cohort. The cohort that was, essentially upset about the nature of their personality, which was, by the standards of society, seen to be feminine. Boys like me. And hundreds like them. They're talking here about young people. So they're talking about this concept of teenagers, I think, with ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria, or something similar. Turns out that gender dysphoria is not well understood, as I said. Gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms, several of which are based upon gender stereotypes. Now, that's a very interesting statement. It turns out that gender dysphoria is not well understood. Gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms, several of which are based upon gender stereotypes. One of the symptoms is discomfort that can be painfully severe, but having gender dysphoria does not on its own indicate the best treatment to resolve it for the long term. Successful short-term relief is insufficient. Think opioids, i.e., the long-term solution is not what we're seeing, the puberty blockers, the sterilisation, the medicalisation, the operations, the cosmetic surgeries are not the answer. But there's something in this paragraph that I think we need to be aware of, and that I would like to question. It turns out that gender dysphoria is not well understood. Gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms, several of which are based upon gender stereotypes. I think they've got that wrong. And I would very much like if you could let me know in the comments if you think they've got it wrong. Jen Spector, really involved in this and involved with many people, but I think they've got that wrong. And the reason I think they've got that wrong, and I'm going to say it again despite the repetition, gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms, several of which are based upon gender stereotypes. I don't think that's true. I'm sorry, I don't, and I would like to hear from others about whether they think it is. Gender dysphoria is a symptom of another problem. It is not a set of symptoms. The focus here is that gender dysphoria is the issue, even though the article is going to an explanation of, I fell for it from a liberal perspective because this was a good person. They're falling for it again. That's my worry. Gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms. No, it's not. Gender dysphoria, or that what they call gender dysphoria, is an indicator that there is a collection of symptoms, but the gender dysphoria, I don't think it's got anything to do with it because gender doesn't exist, right? They're just happy with their body for whatever reason, and that's one thing amongst a cluster of symptoms which needs for us to move forward and look, firstly, with a child protection and safeguarding lens. Gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms. It's not. If you say that gender dysphoria is a set of symptoms, then you set up gender as prime, as primacy. Gender dysphoria is not a set of symptoms. There are a set of symptoms which include gender dysphoria. Do you see the nuance I'm trying to... I hope you understand what I'm saying, and I hope you will comment in the dubris, as they say. But having gender dysphoria does not on its own indicate the best treatment to resolve it for the long term. Again, we're back to... But it should... Shouldn't this say, but being in distress for whatever reason? But we know already that there are, issues with young people who will be gay or lesbian. We know that in the Dutch model, the original model, all of them were gay or lesbian. I think bar one, in the original protocols that came out. But it's my concern here is this concept that at the centre of all this, gender dysphoria, even though they're calling it a collective of symptoms, gender dysphoria becomes the central point. You have to abandon this language. This is someone in distress, for whatever reason it might be. Whatever reason it might be. It's a really interesting article, folks, and I'm keeping it short because I want you to read that first couple of sections because it is a very long article and it goes into quite a bit of depth. But my argument here is this focus on the concept of something called gender dysphoria, which quite frankly is just distress, can obfuscate, if we are not careful, that if a child, and I mean somebody under 18, if a child comes to you and says that they're trans, that is a child protection and safeguarding issue first and foremost. Gender dysphoria is not a hub around which these symptoms are placed. The "I have got gender dysphoria" comment is a indicator of symptoms of a greater malaise. Right? Okay. Excuse me. It's a bit, a bit up the nose. Right. Oh, for God's sake, don't start. Now, see? Do you see what I'm saying? Right? It's time to have the conversation, okay? It's time to have the conversation. Gender identity is personality, gender expression is fashion. We are not here, any of us, and I hope including GenSpect, to give credence to an entire body of false information and fake reality by assuming that gender dysphoria or gender in any form is central to the problems of the individual. The individual. The individual. That's what I think, but I need to know from you. So you put it in the comments, please, right, share this on YouTube, okay? We need to do more of the sharing thing. Like and share it if you can. If you're on Tube watching it, like and retweet it. We need to talk about this, right? I think there needs to be a full conversation about this. If a child comes to you, I'm just going to repeat myself again, comes to you and says, "I'm trans," that is a red flag. It's that simple, okay? Because trans is a social contagion first and foremost. It's a social contagion first and foremost. It then breaks down into very discrete groups, different groups of people that have all been gathered under the trans umbrella, which has led to the medicalization and sterilization of children globally. That's what it's led to, okay? A rank idea that came from San Francisco in the 1980s. That's where all the umbrella stuff came from. So, no, okay? We must not use the language of the cult. We must not use the language of people who wish to obfuscate the reality of sex bodies. We must ensure that young people who present with something, whatever that distress may be, if that involves ideation of the other, of the changing of sex, if that involves the ideation that they are in some way in the wrong body, that is simply an indicator of distress. It should be dismissed as central to a diagnostic criteria, and you must deal with the fact that there is obviously something else going on in that person's life, whatever it may be. The first and foremost gatekeeping for all of this is child protection and safeguarding. That's it, folks. There's the message, okay? Gender identity is personality. Gender expression is fashion. The rest is social contagion, fetish, or paraphilia. Okay. That's it for today. There's something serious about this. I'll speak to you later.